Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 2 of Profound Ramblings. My name is Kevin, joined by my co host Max. And on this podcast, we just ramble about profound things,
Yeah.
hence the podcast name. But basically, we just talk about personal development things that we read about, experience ourselves, and we just try to articulate it in a way that maybe it'll be helpful for you. So last week, I forgot where we ended off. I think we were talking about self-integrity and stuff, and then segueing into the subconscious mind. And it's crazy because I don't think a lot of people understand that we have basically two minds, and the one that controls everything that's on autopilot when we're not actively thinking, that's the most powerful one that kind of watches over you and creates all like the programs for you. Like they say that your brain is like a computer, the subconscious mind is like the programmer that writes all the codes that run that computer of yours. And when I first learned about it, it was like super interesting because you can have like a conscious thought, but really, if you don't really believe that, if your subconscious doesn't really believe that, then you're probably not going to take that action or do what you say you're going to do, because your subconscious mind, like if you say you're going to do something, it kind of like runs like a history check on yourself where it's like, well, did you do this thing before? What happened the last time you did it? And so like, good.
Sorry, I was just gonna interrupt you because this is exactly kind of like a thought that I had cross my mind today with regards to affirmations. And one of the things that I feel like you always hear like people who preach like self-help and like all that kind of stuff is to do affirmations and like speak things into existence. And it's something I've tried and something that I've actually incorporated into my daily journal until actually today, because I've had this realization. And this is also something that happens when you're aware of things, and journaling is one of those things that really does bring things to the front of mind and helps you realize kind of the patterns because you do things over and over again. So one of those things was like affirmations. It's like the realization that, all right, well, I'm speaking these things, I'm writing these things down, but what effect are they having on me, and are they having any effect on me? And the reality is, at least for me, it doesn't really have that much of a profound effect. And then the next question, that I would ask myself is like, why? Why doesn't it have that much of a profound effect? And that's when I've come to realize that your mind is smarter than you think, and it's that subconscious mind that realizes you're lying to yourself. Like, you're lying to your mind. Like, you're trying to tell yourself that you are this or this is this. So your subconscious mind knows what's true and not true. You can't lie to yourself. There has to be an underlying evidence or a series of underlying evidence that supports that affirmation in order for your brain to actually perceive it as being that's something true. And unless it's there, you could scream it into until you lose your voice. It's still not going to become true.
Right. And like that goes along with like mantras and stuff. I actually have a mantra written on my whiteboard that I'm looking at right in front of me. And like one of the things on it, on my personal mantra, is that my word is law. Like I will not break no promise to myself and others. And that means like I'll always be a man of my word. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to go do it. And if my behaviors didn't model that, like if I was always a person that said I was going to do something but never ended up doing it, which I used to be, then those are just words written on a whiteboard. They mean nothing. Like, even if you want to actively and consciously believe it, your subconscious mind, who's like the observer, will be like, what's this guy talking about? He's not this person. As you like, actually, if I once I started doing things I said I was going to do, then I actually became that person. And then I aligned like my conscious mind and subconscious mind, because my subconscious mind, seeing all this new evidence of me doing what I said I was going to do, it's like, oh, okay, Kevin is now the man that he says he is. So let me, write the programs that will help support that, which is like, you have these written programs about you, but you can, like, people should understand that you can overwrite them either in a good way or a bad way. Like, if you start going in the wrong direction, like, your subconscious mind will follow. It doesn't really support you in a way that you want. It just supports you in a way that is most comfortable to you, because the mind defaults back to comfortability. And if you're starting to go in this wrong direction that you don't desire, but you get used to it, that becomes your new comfortability level. But if you start, changing and doing good things for yourself, then that becomes your new comfortability level. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's yes, you can make changes, but the reality is they're not easy. And especially when it comes to tackling your subconscious mind and those beliefs that you have, a lot of the time they're ingrained, and they've been ingrained not over a year, not over, a couple of months or whatever it may be. They've been ingrained in you over probably your whole entire lifespan. So it's like you're trying to, if we're talking about in computer terms, I mean, you're literally trying to override your operating system. Like the things that, boots you up in the morning and turns you on. That's really the complexity that comes down to. But this also got me thinking, it's like, well, on one hand, for me, and maybe for other people, like affirmations don't work. Because you don't believe in them and you don't have the evidence to support them. But there are people for who affirmations do work. I mean, it wouldn't be something that people talked about if it was all bogus. So I'm like, it got me thinking to how can you make it work? How can you provide evidence to your mind, similar to kind of what you were saying, that what you're saying is actually true? And the reality is all you have to do is just ask yourself the question. Like, if you're saying, for instance, I'm courageous, or whatever it may be, it's like, when in your life can you remember when this was actually true? And this thought to me came actually from reading David Goggins' book, and what he refers to it as like a mental cookie jar, where there's difficult things that you've had to do in your life in the past, challenges that you've had to overcome. And that's basically that mental cookie jar where you store all those things that align with the affirmation that you're speaking into existence now, but subconsciously you may not believe. So it's like you got to tap into that and prove to your mind, actively prove to your mind that those things are actually true.
No, that's for real true. Like, I have a real life example of that courageous thing. Um, I remember last year during around this time, actually it was in July, I made a plan to fly to Vegas to attend this event. It was a UFC X event, and in my objective was to possibly meet some of these fighters and sign them aboard as clients. And I was thinking about it. I was like, damn, I've never done something like this before. But I kept thinking and thinking, and that's not actually true, because I've done something similar, just maybe not in the same aspect, in the same experience, but I've done something similar. Like, I've been invited to like private investor conferences that I worked as a volunteer, and then when it came to networking time, I made use of that time and I Like, I approached all these investors and told them about the startup that I was working on. That took to me that took a lot of balls for me. And then once I remembered that, and it's so easy, it's kind of funny how easy it is to forget stuff like that. But once I remembered that, like, my whole experience when I went to go talk to these fighters, it became so much easier because I was like, I've done this before,
Yeah.
and it just made it. I mean, it was still uncomfortable, but I got used to it,
The
and
reality
now,
is, the reality is that for your mind, it's so much easier to go to the negative than it is to the positive. So that's why it's so easy for you to associate negative things with something rather than associating positive things. And that just goes back to just basically the basics of human psychology, which is the need to survive is greater than the need for pleasure.
yeah, for sure. And going back to what you were saying, I think it's hard to change and overwrite some of the programs in your subconscious mind because you kind of have to become a whole different person. Like, all these programs become like a different identity, and you kind of have to shed that identity a little bit, or shed parts of it, to become this new person with all these like new thought processes, and stuff like that. Honestly, I think the I don't know if this is true. I just believe this is the simplest way to get your subconscious mind on board with you, is just like build self-integrity. Just whatever you say you're going to do, or think about what you're going to do, you actually do it. So then, like, your subconscious mind will believe, okay, well, this person is someone who will actually do what they're going to do, say they're going to do. So let me, when in times that they might need like a little motivation or something, let me provide and align myself to help that person and actually go and do those things. Whereas, if you weren't somebody with a lot of self-integrity, when it comes down to actually doing the things, maybe instead of summoning the courage out of thin air, you start hearing all these excuses in your head justifying why you shouldn't move forward. And I've seen it work both ways because I've experienced both. There are times when I have no idea where it comes from, but I was just like, all right, F it. I'm going to go do this thing. And I end up walking forward and going to go do it. And there are times in my past where I've heard a whole bunch of excuses echoing in my head of why I shouldn't do this one thing, and I didn't end up doing it. Obviously, two different places in my life at both times, but I think it's because I managed to align my subconscious mind to my conscious mind a little closer. As in, like, if I say I'm going to go do something, I'm actually going to go do it. So I have like the support of my subconscious mind there.
And the reality is, it's a lot of the time, or at least actually probably majority of the time, it's not the big things, but the little things that matter. It's like the
Yeah.
little promises that you make to yourself, you know, like, I mean, it could be as simple as making the bed in the morning. It's like if you make that promise and you keep that promise to yourself, or, like if you say you're going to work out and you make that promise to yourself and you go work out. And it builds a different kind of framework inside your mind where you start thinking you're the kind of person that keeps their promises and does what they say they're going to do.
Yeah. That's why it says on my mantra, my word is law. I will break no promise to myself and others. Because I've been the person that has quit stuff early and not be consistent. And I am now the person who is very consistent at things. And I'd much rather be the person I am now. Um, and I think
Speaking, I was just going to say, speaking of, quitting things, I don't think quitting is necessarily a bad thing, but it's also good. It's always good to understand why you're
it
doing
depends
it.
on the context of why you're
Yes,
quitting.
yes, it does depend on the context, but what I was trying to get to is it's important to understand why, the reasoning behind it. Is it because it's something that's not working, or is it or is there other reasons for it? And what I'm trying to get to, is there a limiting belief that you have for why this is working and why it's not going to work?
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. It happens a lot with like content creation and stuff like that. Like, for example, I built my own personal brand TikTok to like 900 followers, but I was talking about stuff that I thought was just popular. I wasn't really talking about things that really mattered to me. I was talking like a lot about marketing and business stuff. And honestly, I don't really enjoy talking about those kinds of things. I mean, it's stuff that I do, but the things I enjoy talking about are what we're talking about now, or like anime or like sports. Like those are the things that really appeal to me. And I've like I think around this time a year ago I stopped creating videos on my TikTok after like 6 months of 5 days a week uploading at least one video. And it was because it wasn't that it wasn't working. It was working. I was growing my page and whatnot. It was more so that I actually didn't enjoy it. It was just like it felt like something I was doing to keep myself busy for no reason, and it wasn't really aligned with the actual projects that I'm working on anyway. That was more so the reason. I did have thoughts about it if it was because I just gave up because I'm not someone that can play the long game in content, but that's not true either.
You know what
So
it
I know
sounds like
that's
to
not
me?
true.
It sounds like to me, and you could correct me if this is wrong, it sounds like a limiting belief where it doesn't make sense for me to keep going because I don't think it's going to work.
It could have been that. It very well could have been that. And I've had those thoughts before. This was just a more recent one where I've turned into a different person. So I didn't think it was that, but it very well could have been. And I do know a lot of people who have quit stuff because they either didn't think it was going to work because they weren't seeing the results in the amount of time they were doing it. They just like my client, for example. Like he's a pretty well known fighter. He has a YouTube page that has like 9,500 followers or something. And he used to make these videos that used to get thousands of views, like him making jokes about like UFC cards and stuff like that. But then he just like stopped and dropped off. And his main reasoning is because, when he looks at the views and stuff, it's not as big as it once was. So it's like very discouraging. And he just stopped. And he very well could have a limiting mindset that, all right, well, maybe the things that I'm doing aren't working anymore. And that may or may not be true, but it's
But
probably not true because, you
here's
know,
the thing, here's the thing that I've come to realize. And when it comes to giving excuses, when you give an excuse for why you're not doing something or why you're stopping something, typically you only ask yourself one why. You ask yourself the first why, which is, why do I need to keep going, or why do I need to stop this? But the reality is the answer actually lies several whys beyond that, because what you're getting at is only the surface level. I don't remember what book I read or where I heard this, but it was basically the thing where ask yourself 5 whys. Ask yourself the first why, give the answer. Then once you give that answer, ask yourself the why about the answer that you gave, and then go down the line until you actually get to the actual reason for what it is, because majority of the time, the first answer that comes into your mind is not the actual answer for what the reasoning is.
yeah, I've heard that before. I forgot who it was. It might have been Simon Sinek. But yeah, no, I've heard about that before. And I've actually looked at it before. And like, as you ask yourself more whys, the deeper it goes, it actually becomes a part, like the final why is associated with like your identity. So it's like, I remember a business example about this, and I think this woman's final why was something along the lines of like, oh, I just want to provide, like, prove to myself that I'm a good parent. I can provide for my kids a comfortable life or something like that. That was much different than, the first surface why that she asked. But yeah, I mean, I didn't go that deep on why I stopped. I just, I just didn't really enjoy it. For some other people, it might be down to, since they're not seeing the results that they want to see, like that final why might be, I just don't think I'm a content creator, or I'm
Yeah, but
built for
it
this,
goes
or something like
beyond
that.
that. It really does go beyond that because that's just like the first why. It's never. It's. I'm not a content creator. It's not. It would definitely would not be the reason why. Because if you ask yourself like, why do you think you're not a content creator? What would your answer be?
Well, my answer would be different, but for a typical person, it might come down to like, I'm not smart enough to create something to go viral or something.
Yeah, and then you got to ask yourself the next question is, why do you think you're not smart enough to create something to go viral?
Right, and you keep going down.
And you keep going down because then like then you might answer that question with, well, I don't think I have, I don't think I have the right skills. Why don't you have the right skills? Well, because maybe I don't actually believe I could be good at this. Or why don't you
Yeah.
believe that you could be good at this? Like you could keep going down the line until you figure out like what the baseline of that is, which comes down to like that limiting belief. And it kind of goes full circle a bit to the idea that, you know, a lot of this stuff is in your subconscious mind, but you don't even realize how much it influences you until you really dig deep. Like you have to ask the whys because you have those limiting beliefs. And sometimes, you think the reasoning is, one thing, which is like that surface level thing, when in reality, there's a much deeper rooted limiting belief that exists there. And it just like really made me think, like today which is something I do on a daily basis, journaling. And it's something that I was thinking about. I actually wrote this thing. Basically, it says, you're living in a mental prison that you created for yourself. You just don't realize it because it feels safe and comfortable. And it's the realization that these like core limiting beliefs, or like the limit, or whatever the limiting beliefs that you have, they're comfortable. They feel safe. That's why you end up reverting to them. But you don't realize, even though they feel comfortable and even though they feel safe, they basically create a mental prison for you where, like you're limiting yourself to what you could do, how much you could achieve, and what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I read about that concept in the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. He talks about like, you're in a field and you built your own house, but it has see-through walls. And eventually, you want to venture out into the field, but you feel safe inside the house and you don't really want to leave the house. So you kind of make the house comfortable. Like you furnish it, do whatever you want to make it as comfortable as possible inside the house. But all at the same time, you can see beyond the walls because it's see through, which is like a metaphor for it. There are no boundaries; it's all imaginary. So you can see the field that you want to travel to, but you still want to stay inside the house. And you can go as close to the edge as possible, and you can have it stop you, or you could simply open the door and walk out because or just put your hand through the wall, because those walls don't even exist in the first place. It's just something you created.
It just makes me
And
think of basically like, when you have a dream and the dream just seems so real and so realistic where you feel like you're in it. It just almost kind of like a limiting belief is when you when you experience it in real life. It, realistically speaking, it's probably some I mean it's made up in your mind and it's not real. But it feels so real. Like it feels like it's such a important thing to you when in reality it's probably insignificant.
oh, it's all insignificant if you look at it from the bigger picture view. It's all not a big deal. You just amplify it in your mind. I mean, the brain is not it's afraid of being uncomfortable, and that's just something that you kind of have to either get used to and accept and still work against, or you don't. And you stay in that zone of comfortability, and you stay in your mental prison.
But the
But
crazy thing is, and here's the crazy reality, is even though you could be aware of this and know this, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get affected by it. And you're not, that your limiting beliefs are going to go away. It's
yeah,
just
of course.
because your subconscious mind, it works on autopilot. So it kicks in without you wanting it to kick in. So unless you're really present, unless you're really aware, which is honestly really, really hard to do, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to be able to just basically rewire that neural pathway in your subconscious brain for if this happens, then your subconscious mind reacts this way.
No, it's true. And the easy example I could think about is like in terms of rejection. Like I might think that I'm not afraid of rejection because I've gotten over 1,000 no's, I'm pretty sure, over the course of me doing like business stuff and entrepreneurial stuff. And honestly, in a business context, I don't really care about rejection. If it's a no, that's cool. But let's say if I wanted to approach like a pretty girl I saw out in public in like a coffee shop, like the if I wasn't afraid of rejection, I would just go up and speak to her. But there's more hesitation there. And why? It's not, even though I want to think that I'm afraid of rejection, it's not exactly true. Even though it might be true in a different aspect of my life, the different, like, the brain itself still doesn't want to be rejected. Um,
Yeah,
so,
100%.
so it's like funny how that works.
I mean, it's similar to, I kind of experience a similar thing to, so for instance, like for me, like in business, I have no problem getting rejected in business if it's like in person, email, text, whatever it is. But if you get to like phone calls and having to do outbound prospecting and cold calling, it's
Yeah.
a like a different part of my brain gets triggered by it, and I'm still kind of trying to figure this out for how this freaking shit works. Because in my head, logically, I could reason for why there's nothing that I need to worry about, be afraid about, be anxious about, or whatever. But no matter how many times I do it, or you know, it it's it still brings up the same feelings. And the interesting thing about it is I could be completely comfortable with it today, and tomorrow it's going to be a completely different feeling because my subconscious mind kicks back in.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you have yourself to that different state. Um, which is like something else we could dive deeper on in the future. But like if you follow Joe Dispenza's stuff, that's why he talks about remembering your future, because that person in the future probably has all the qualities that you would like to experience every day. So you kind of, when you do his meditations or when you do a meditation, you kind of put yourself in that state to remind yourself to get yourself out of whatever state you're in into a higher frequency. And it works. It does work. Like, I've done it. This is something I try to do when I become aware of it. I just call it recalibrating myself. Like, I mean, we're all humans. We don't wake up the same, like, with the same emotions every single day. For the most part, it is, but sometimes you have down days and sometimes you have good days. So on the down days, when I'm feeling like in a state of lack or something, if I catch myself, if I'm present and aware of it, I can remember like the person who I want to be and try to get into that state. And for the temporary period, I'll forget about the down state that I'm in, and I'll be actively in the higher frequency, higher energy state, and go on about my day.
I was just going to
Yeah.
add one more thing to it. Remembering your future, but I think it's also important to process your past in the same way that you see yourself from the future, and your future self is, in a sense, talking to you and giving you advice. It's important to be able to figure out why you're having certain emotions or certain limiting beliefs and where they originate from, and being able to meditate on that and have a conversation with your younger self, or your younger self have a conversation with you, in order for you to be able to process that and basically process that and be able to go on to whatever, to the future and not have it affect you, which is hard to do in itself. But I think a lot of it comes to experiences that you've had in your past and unprocessed emotions.
Yeah, I think so. I also think on like a bigger picture, it's like everyone is afraid to let go of control. Or they want
100%.
to think that they know that something is going to happen or control the outcome of something, which is probably why rejection is such a fearful thing for a lot of people. They wish that they can control what's going to happen, but at the end of the day, they probably also know that they don't know what's going to happen. But you would like to think that you're in control. Well, if you do all the right things, the outcome should be in your favor.
Well, a
But
lot of it goes back to like literally your primitive mind, but back in the days when you know people were living in freaking caves, is you know back then, if you were to survive, you had to fit in with the tribe or the group of people that you were with. Rejection was considered to be something as extremely negative, because if you were rejected by the community that you're a part of or ousted, basically your survival chances go down substantially.
yeah, I think all the survival needs, you pretty much have a pretty good control over. And I think because like if it comes down to like finding food or finding water,
You have
uh,
good control of it, but you still have subconscious thoughts because of the way that basically your mind developed, and that drive like innate needs. It's kind of goes back to the idea of like the monkey mind. I don't know if you've ever heard about that.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's like the lizard brain. I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
that's another name for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It
It's
always goes back to the survival stuff, and I think that's why like when you're in a zone, when you're in a state of comfortability, your brain thinks that you can control all the stuff that's within that zone. So if you start to venture out of it, it starts to go crazy and want to take a step back. But I mean that's why you got to increase your zone of comfortability, because that's something you can easily do too.
one of my mentors is actually makes me think, like, I remember one time talking to him about like discomfort and comfort, and he was like, well, you know what my mentor told me back in the day is you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's basically where the growth happens.
Yeah, right. It's easier said than done, but you kind of have to, when you're in those situations, you kind of have to understand what's going on, because it's easy to get caught into like your subconscious programs. You're like, oh, crap, this is scary. I don't want to go do it. But if you're able to stop yourself and be like, wait, and change like your perspective and say like, wait, if I do this, I'm probably going to still be alive after. And the benefit is that I'll either increase my zone of my stress threshold, my zone of comfortability, and if it works out, cool. And if not, I'll still be alive at the end of the day. What was I going to say? One of my clients, actually, I did a newsletter piece with him either last week or the week before, but he was talking about like his inner child. So like when he has a fight booked and he has to like be brave, like everyone gets scared. Every fighter gets scared before a fight. Like people who say they don't are lying because they're all humans at the end of the day anyway.
Just
So
realizing that it's not a negative thing, it's a good thing.
yeah. So like when he has to be brave, or when he is feeling scared, he has those nerves, that anxiety. He thinks about his younger self, that inner child. He thinks about how the place where he is today is where that inner child used to daydream of being, first of all. And then you think about how would that inner child envision his adult self to act? And the answer is always be brave and just walk forward in the face of fear. And that has motivated him just to get past, those points of doubt, of self-doubt and fear, because we all go through it. But that's how he handles it. Going back to your point when you were talking about your inner self, your past self or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. The other thing that I kind of wanted to segue into, and I thought this might be interesting, is talking, and this is something that I've started doing, is talking about things that you're implementing in your day-to-day life or working on implementing in your day-to-day life. And maybe we could also potentially follow up with it on the next episode and kind of talk about the progress and the impact that has had.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you bring that up, because that's something I try to do, because I mean, you know what the reticular activating system is, right?
Yeah.
Like your brain looks for stuff that you're focused on, basically. So like for the people out there that don't know, if you say like you want a certain car or something, and it's in your mind, all of a sudden you'll start seeing that car everywhere. And it's not like that car magically appeared.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it was always there. You just are starting to notice it now because your mind is focused on it. So I try to, at the end of every day, I try to ask myself like, oh, what went well today? Because I know my mind will tend to go to negative stuff if things are like stagnant, or if I don't feel like things progressing upward. I know my mind, I know myself, and I know my mind will start being anxious about the future. So I try to combat that. I try to refocus my mind on, oh, what went well today? And it could be easily as I did my workout, as I said I would this morning, or I went for my walk, got my 8,000 steps in, or like I went, did laundry. I don't know, like simple stuff like that, just to focus on.
So what's one
Geared
thing
towards
that
positive.
you're implementing right now, or you're working on implementing in your day-to-day routine, or like one thing that you're working to personally improve on?
Personally improve on. I haven't thought about anything specific, but the one thing I do want to improve on, which we were talking about earlier, is going more outside of my like comfortability boundary, like doing things that make me uncomfortable. I would say that's the one that I've been recently trying to focus on. Oh, like in my life, the one thing that I've tried to do recently is in jujitsu, because there's training, but then there's also when you have to go live and actually put stuff into practice while someone else is trying to also strangle you or submit you too. And that has always made me pretty nervous, actually, before we go live. One, because I don't like losing. I know I'm going to lose for the most part. And two, I don't know. It just makes me very uncomfortable. Recently, I think in the past 2 or 3 weeks, I've been forcing myself to go do these sessions more often, which is, for those of you who don't do jujitsu, it's going to open mat, which is free rolling. It's not really training. So you're sparring the whole entire time for like an hour. So I've been doing those consistently for the past 3 weeks, and I've noticed the anxiety that I have prior to going to those just slowly going down. And now I'm actually kind of enjoying it, even though I'm still losing and stuff like that. But I can see myself getting better. But it's just like,
It comes down to gradual improvement and focusing on one thing at a time. And one thing that I used to struggle with is similar to how you would go at the end of the day and think about all the things that you did right or all the things that you accomplished. I used to think about what are the things that I need to improve on and all the things that I need to do better tomorrow. And of course, there's always a long list. And in the beginning, I try to do all of them or implement them all simultaneously. But then I realized there's only so much mental willpower that you have. And to try to do like a handful or implement a handful of improvements, basically what's going to happen, at least what's happened to me, is basically you're going to try to do all of them, but none of the improvements are actually going to stick. So what's important is to just stick to one, implement into your life, make sure it kind of basically becomes like a subconscious thing that you do without you having to implement too much mental willpower, and then go on to the next one. And what I was going to talk about, so for me right now, what I'm trying to do and what I'm working on is having a good sleep routine. It seems simple, and really is simple. Just go to bed on time. But in reality, it could be a lot more difficult because for me, I want to wake up bright and early. I want to be up by 5 a.m. in the morning. But in order for me to do that and feel rested, I have to go to sleep basically. I have to be in bed before 9 a.m. And it seems simple, but it's difficult from the point of view that there's things that you're going to have to say no to. Let's just say my wife or your significant other wants to watch a show. Like, you have to be able to say no to that. Your friend wants to grab a beer. You have to be able to say no to that. Like, there's things that you have to sacrifice. And I'm realizing this, and this is why it's so hard to keep it consistent, is because there are sacrifices you have to make. There are people that you have to disappoint and people you have to say no to. And basically for me, that all encompasses into going to sleep early and going to sleep on time. It's something that's simple, but it encompasses so many different principles that I originally didn't even think about. And it's something that I want to follow up on the next episode, just to basically talk about the impact that it has had on my day-to-day when it comes to my energy levels, my focus, and how much I'm able to accomplish. I think it's going to be interesting to see the impact that it has, and almost basically treated like an experiment to see if it
yeah.
works and what effect it has.
Yeah, if you're talking about a daily habit, I mean, the most recent one I implemented was like trying to walk 8,000 steps a day. And I've been pretty good about it. I haven't gone for my walk today, But
So
as you
I think on the next episode, what would be good is for, since you're staying consistent with it and you're continuing on with it, I think on the next episode, let's follow up with the impact that it has had on your day to day, and the impact this has had, on different aspects of of your life.
Yeah, I'll even show this to the camera to keep me accountable. As you can see, it's more
Mm-hmm.
than 8,000
You got to make sure
steps.
you get out there today.
Besides today, I've walked 52,000 steps this week, which is 23.5 miles, which is kind of insane to think about. But yeah, that's definitely one. And I try to look at like bigger aspects that I try to improve daily, like staying present. Like I think that is probably the most difficult thing ever for me, at
Right.
least, because
Yeah.
I'm always like thinking in my head and stuff like that. And whenever I catch myself, I was like, "Damn, how long was I just thinking in my head?" And I look at the time; it's like 20 minutes have passed by. I was like,
Speaking of being present, we've been going on this for quite a bit. So I was just gonna say, even though this is called, what is the name? Rambling thoughts,
"Profound ramblings."
profound ramblings. Just so we don't ramble on too much longer, I think this is a good spot to end it. And then next episode, we'll basically we'll continue on basically the stuff that we've been talking about, and then we'll also touch base on the two things that what I'm working on, and then what you're working on, and the impact it has on our day to day and our productivity.
Yep, for sure, for sure. All right, we'll end it there, and we'll see you guys next time.